Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. Pleased to have with me back on the show today, Chris Andresen. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey.
Fun to have you back, Chris. It was fun to review some new movies for this episode. A few of these aren't as new as they were when we saw them, but uh, they're newish. They're 2024 movies, all four of these. So I'll just jump into it, which are with our first one, which I was really excited to review, and that film is Chimera, Chimera. I had to look up the pronunciation of this
Good job.
word by Alice Rohrwacher, who is a filmmaker I actually love. I've seen, she's made four feature films and one documentary. I loved all of them. And she is an Italian filmmaker with a German background, in case you're wondering about the name. German father, Italian mother, but grew up in Italy. And the film stars Josh O'Connor, who's in two movies we're reviewing today. He's also in Challengers as a British archaeologist who kind of joins up with this ragtag group of people to steal Etruscan artifacts. The film's set during the 1980s. And Isabella Rossellini, in a wonderful small role, plays this kind of aging villa owner whose daughter dated his character at one time, and she employs a gosh, the plot of this movie is really hard to describe. I
I
had
was
to
gonna
say,
say,
Chris,
I don't even know.
I
Yeah,
know
how
when
you
I was
feel.
like looking at the ones I gave myself, I'm like, this is the hardest one to describe. She employs a woman who's taking music lessons from her, but has no musical ability, played by Carol Duarte, who's actually my favorite character in the movie. Her character's name is Italia, and she becomes a sort of love interest, kind of, for
Right.
Josh O'Connor's character, but she's not the typical love interest. She is essentially taking music lessons and living in Isabella Rossellini's fading villa in order to basically because she has two kids and is actually houseless. So, and so what one of the things I love about Alice Rohrwacher's films, and this one really fits in with a lot of what she's interested in. She has fantastical elements in all of her films, so she really blends magic realism and fantasy with very realistic scenarios, often focused on people in the underclass, working class, not even just working class, really very poor people on the outskirts of Italy. That's been a theme in most of her films, and that is again the theme in this film. Josh O'Connor, who I was not familiar with at all, and now I've seen two films with him, I think gives a great performance as this kind of, he has this great kind of like hangdog expression, is how I'd describe it. And he is employed by this group because he has this ability to literally kind of sense where these artifacts are hidden
Yeah, with
in
that
the
divining
ground.
rod, it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I loved this movie. It's definitely a four-star movie for me. It's probably not for everyone, but because I'm already a fan of her movies, I went in with high hopes and it did not disappoint. I'm anxious to hear what you thought, Chris.
Yeah, and see, I am not a fan of her films in the sense that I've never seen any of her other films. And so I went in cold on this one. And I think if you love her as a filmmaker, you would love this film. I think if you've not seen anything else by them, I'm not sure this is the film to start with because I don't know, would you say this is their best film of the ones that you've seen?
Probably not. But I
Not
don't
that
know.
it's
I think
bad,
it's
yeah.
as accessible as any of her other ones. I mean, some of most of her first two films are more coming of age stories, and so those
Mhm.
might be slightly more accessible. But they're all have those kind of fantastical elements where you're not sure
Mhm.
what's real and what's not, or what's
Yeah,
imagined and what's not. And so
it's
I think
true.
if you have issues with magic realism, this probably isn't the movie for you. But
Yeah.
I tend to like that in my movies. So
Yeah. And I liked those aspects of this film. I mean, it's like it's very ambiguous in terms of what is real and what might be imagined. I also like the actress who played Italia, but I wasn't quite sure what to make of that relationship. But yeah, it's not a linear or literal plot by any means. And so
No.
maybe for a first time viewer of her work, it's a little bit, maybe it's a lot, to sort of take on, although I like films that aren't particularly linear and plot driven. But this one maybe challenged me a little bit more than some. I really liked the characterizations of the people. I love the kind of the tribe of people who are going in and rating the art. There were some fascinating things happening there. And Josh O'Connor, I first got to see him in The Crown playing a young Prince Charles. And so it's been interesting
Mm.
to see him go from that to this to Challengers. You're right. He does definitely look very hangdog in this. And then every once in a while he'll give kind of a sly smile. And so that charm or whatever that he brings
That's
to.
funny that he played Prince Charles. I've never seen that show because I'm not into all that British stuff, but I could sort of see that because of his ears sticking
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
But he's
yeah.
way, way,
Yeah.
way better looking than
Yeah,
Prince
yeah, yeah.
Charles.
For
Of course,
sure.
everyone's usually better looking than the real people, but gosh, like Prince Charles, you can barely look at that guy. So Josh O'Connor's got kind of like I would call it a hangdog sexiness to him,
Yeah, he's not
despite
maybe typical sexy, but he's very attractive, I think. Yeah.
yeah, he's got something. But I love the way she and one of her probably her most accessible film in terms of being able to find it is Happy as Lazaro because Netflix put that one out,
Mhm.
which was her last feature before this one. She did a documentary in between the two, interviewing young people about the state of Italy today, which is actually also a great film, by the way. But Happy as Lazaro, which made my top 10 that year, is also about this group of people who are out. So she's very interested in these like communal groups of people who are outsiders, and then this group, the group of thieves, despite the fact they're thieves and they're criminals, are very likable. They're like such
Yeah.
an interesting little group of people, I thought.
Well, and have their own kind of sense of morality too, which I thought was interesting. So, yeah, no, I thought it was a good film. To me, it's a little bit long in the sense that sort of where we'll end up is projected, I think, a little bit early in the film, and so there
Mm.
was a little bit of it that lagged for me towards the end. But on the whole, I think it's a solid film. I wish I had seen more of her work because I think that would up the appreciation for this particular film. But I thought it was great. It
Yeah,
just there were a few things where I was like, wait, what? What's happening?
yeah, yeah. It can be a little bit like that. Yeah. Well, anytime you want to check out her other films, I'll be happy to help you out with that because I'm
Well, and normally I
obviously a
would have
fan.
tried, but I ran out of time this time. But yeah, it was like I could see how being a person who watches all of the films might be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I do suggest like people check out Happy as Lazaro, which is easily available on Netflix, and check out this one. I didn't look up to see where her other two films. She did a film called The Wonders, which is probably my favorite film of hers of all of them. And The Wonders is just it's super magic real. It's just beautiful, and it's a coming of age story about this young girl and Corpus Christi is also a coming of age story about a young girl in Italy. So they're all great films. So I
Great.
don't
Well,
think I'm saying Corpus Christi is not right. It's Corpus something. Anyway,
yeah.
I didn't write it down, so that's what I get for doing
Well,
that.
and I
Okay.
could see that that'd be a good, she'd be a good person to do a sort of review of all the films probably together.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, for sure. So, but Carol Duarte was kind of the find here for me because was not familiar with her. She's actually a Brazilian actress. She's mostly known in Brazil for her work, the one that plays Italia, which is interesting because she's playing this very kind of like typical Italian woman,
Mhm.
which is great. And I just thought I loved how quirky her character was. She isn't the typical love interest, which I like.
No.
She's
Yeah.
very quirky and I like that she kind of just calls him on his crap, like she's actually doing something sort of illegal herself, but she has a line there. And when she finds out what his character and all of the group is doing, she
Right.
opposes it very
Yeah.
vehemently. So it's interesting. She has this moral. She's like the
There
moral
is a
center of the
morality.
film.
Yeah. There are different morality sort of ideas going on in this in terms of each of the groups of people. Yeah, she's sort
Yeah.
of a highlight of the film, I think, for sure. That
Yeah, she
actress
made
and
me
her
laugh a lot
portrayal.
with some of her funny things she was doing as she was
Totally.
walking around the house hiding her children from
Yeah, the hiding the
Isabella.
children was great. You're like, how long can you get away with that?
I
But
know, I know. It was awesome. Okay, well, let's move on to our next film.
all
So,
right. So our next film is Housekeeping for Beginners, which is both written and directed by Goran Stolevski. And this film really essentially asks, what is a family? And so it's set in North Macedonia and centers on a woman, Dita, who owns a home, who seems to be the home's owner, and who's in a relationship with a woman, Suada, who has two teenage daughters and is dying, I think it was of cancer, right? Does that
Mhm.
sound right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Suada, the one who's dying, belongs to an ethnic group that's treated poorly, and she and Dita are not allowed to marry as a same-sex couple. And then as Sueda is dying, she essentially she asks, but really kind of forces Dita to care for and adopt her two daughters, one who's a teenager and one who's quite a little child. Fraudulently wants her to register them as white so they don't experience the same prejudice that she has experienced. And since lesbians can't adopt, Dita's going to have to marry a man. So Dita makes an assumption that Tony, who's their gay housemate, would be sort of a willing participant, but he's dealing with his own issues, especially around aging. And his latest hookup, Ali, basically moves in and beguiles everyone. And that actor who plays Ali is delightful. I
Mhm.
mean, I think he's a first-time actor. I don't remember his name, but he was really, really great. Um, I saw Stolevski's first film, You Won't Be Alone, as part of one of the film festivals that was doing online screenings. And that one is really very much a horror and fantasy film set in early 19th century Macedonia and had to do with, witches and spells and protecting a baby. And this is definitely a different kind of film set in modern day society. But what I do think it has in common with that first film is a focus on especially women in a society largely controlled by men. And Dita and all of the sort of menagerie of people in her home, because that home is full of all kinds of people,
Yeah.
they're dealing with issues of race, caste, sexual orientation, gender, age, economics, and they have to sort of figure out ways to maneuver in that society to get things accomplished and stay together. So it definitely has some commentary on what it takes for marginalized people to function and get things done, as it were, in a place where they are not prioritized. And I would say, on the whole, I was beguiled by the family, or a collective. I guess you would call them more than, well, family collective. It's both, because they're families of choice and they're also family of origin because of the two young girls and their mother,
Mhm.
Swada. And I also kind of enjoyed the way it laid out the larger politics in the society and gave us access to Swada's family, who lives in Shutka, where I guess the Roma people predominantly live. So there are some really heartbreaking moments in the film. There are some lovely moments. I don't know about the title. I'm not entirely sure what to make of the title. I wouldn't say it's going to be a classic film, but it's definitely a solid film. So I would recommend it to people, and I liked it very much. So how about you, Angela?
I did like it. It actually really stressed me out, and I'll tell
Oh,
you why. So, like, as someone, and maybe you can relate with this because you're an only child, and I'm not an only child, but I grew up in a quieter household. I have two sisters that are quite a bit older than me, so it was often just me and my parents growing up. And it reminded me when I was young, I had a friend who had a large family. She actually had there was 11 girls
oh wow.
that were religious and had a lot of kids, and I would go over to her house, and it was like I could only take so much of it because it was just like you would go over to her house and it was just like steps of children of there was just people everywhere and noise constantly, and some people arguing and some people playing and crying, and then there was animals too, which they didn't have animals in this house, which was good because it would have probably sent me through the roof. And so I find like environments like that really chaotic and kind of stressful. And it was like being in that house with all these people who are, yes, there's a lot of love, but there's a lot of dysfunction and a lot of screaming for two
Mhm.
hours or less than 2 hours, actually, but was like a lot. And I think also the mindset I was in, I was not in a calm. I would go in with, I think I would have enjoyed it better if I'd gone in a calmer mindset, but I was already kind of feeling stressed. And then I get in and I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to fight this whole movie, aren't they? Particularly the teenage daughter, who, quite honestly, I wanted to wring her neck. I understand that she's going through pain. She lost her mother. Totally get all that. But her character is so selfish and so just like, just does everything so irresponsibly, and she treats Dita so horribly for no reason that I can tell. It's not like Dita, you never see Dita like act mean towards her or, be particularly, it's not like she's this horrible stepmother, right? Um, and also I felt really sorry for Dita because as far as I could tell, like she's the only one paying for all the like I'm like, how are
Everything.
they living in this house? Like, does anybody else work besides her? And she has this job, she works in social work, like for the
Yeah,
welfare
so
office. So it
right,
doesn't seem like a particularly high paying job. So I just felt really bad for her a lot of the time. And then it also took me a while to figure out like the one guy that you mentioned, Ali, his character, it was obvious where he came from, but then there's the three women that live there too, the three lesbians, and it
right.
took me forever to figure out like if they were related or not, or what their and I think they just took them in because, like
I
you
think
said, she kind of
so.
takes in the outcasts, particularly from the queer community and gay community that don't have any other place. That said, I still enjoyed it. I'm not recommending the film. I'm just letting people know, like, if you go in watching it, just be prepared. Like, I think for me, it was just bringing up, like, oh, I'm really glad I never had a really big family because this is really stressful to me to, like, all these people in this house yelling. And especially the one time when they're having this fight and the little girl's just like drawing on the wall, like a whole like
Mhm.
thing, and nobody's paying any attention to her. And I was just like, oh.
Well, and you
So
start to think like, thank goodness for Ali to take care of the little one, because those two seem to have a complete, lovely bond and things like that. But yeah, I kept thinking like, did Dita as a social worker come across some of these people in her work and decided to offer them,
mm.
a safe place to
Well,
stay
you get
because
that
they,
sense that's how she met her partner, her wife,
yeah,
because they mentioned at one point that she had been a client at the welfare office. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and you're right. It brings in a lot. It's almost like too much going on in the film. I felt like there was a lot because you have the relationships, you have all the kind of like you mentioned gender and sexuality issues going on. On top
Hmm.
of that, you have all the class issues going on. On top of
Hmm.
that, you have the race issues going on because of the
Hmm.
Roma people and the city there. And then Macedonia, which I'm not familiar with all their politics and
Hmm.
stances, but it seemed to me that it's not that homosexuality itself is illegal like it is in some countries, but it's frowned upon. And it's definitely, they don't have any rights in terms of, that
Right.
was clear because they had to marry in order to get the kids and everything. So there's all the political climate of Macedonia too. So that was just like there's a lot going on, and it's less than 2 hours. So
I know.
he packs a
It's a
lot in.
lot. It's a lot
I
to think
did like it
about.
more than You're Not Alone, which I was not a huge fan of. So I will say I
Yeah.
thought this was a step in a better direction.
It's true.
So
This is a much better film than that, but it's so wild to me to think about the same person making these two films as being such different,
they're very different,
pieces of
yeah. And
art.
I have
Yeah.
to give a shout out. The main actress who plays Dita, Anna Maria
Hmm.
Maremka, is absolutely a fantastic actress.
Yeah.
And it was taking me forever to figure out where I'd seen her before. And then I looked it up, and she was in 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days.
Yeah.
Very famous Romanian film about abortion, where she gave just one of my favorite, just one of the great performances ever. And
Yeah.
she's terrific in that. She's a very understated actress. She does not act, she's not like
Yeah, she's not
it's all,
overacting.
it's
Yeah.
very understated, very much
Yeah.
in the eyes, and she doesn't make a lot of expressions, but you have to watch her carefully. Really terrific actress.
Yeah, and
So,
as the anchor of the whole thing, I can't imagine someone else portraying that character in a different way, sort of more exasperated, more whatever, because she really is sort of the quiet center of the what you're calling, the chaotic family for sure.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So definitely can recommend it. It just left theaters here locally. Might be showing in theaters depending on where you live, viewer, still, but definitely one to look out for.
And I think it was nominated for it was in the running for or was that country's nomination for the best international feature last year.
Yes, it was Macedonia's submission
So in that way, that's
for the
cool.
Oscars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that will make it maybe a little easier to find. All right, our next film is Challengers by Luca Guadagnino, if the internet's pronunciation guide is correct.
That's what I go off of too,
I
girlfriend.
know
So
that's what I was. That was my practice yesterday. Was how do you
that
say
was
it?
with me with La Chimera. I was
That's
like,
right.
because the American me wanted to say
Guadagnino.
Chimera, and then I knew everyone would laugh their butts off at me.
I haven't seen all of the films that Guadagnino has made, but I did really like I Am Love and Call Me by Your Name, although that one's gotten a little bit trickier to watch due to the Army Hammer controversy. But I would say there's a vibrancy and lushness in the films that they make. And I haven't seen Bones and All. I know you saw it, and
I
after
did. I
you
think
saw
I've
it,
seen all of his films.
I know I've been a little bit mixed about whether or not I want to see that one or not. And Suspiria has been on my list for a while, so I need to get around to that one. But Challengers caught my attention from the time of its trailer. I think it had a really effective trailer. And here we get another dose of Josh O'Connor. So we're our
Mhm.
Josh O'Connor episode, almost by accident,
Yes.
along with an actor, Mike Feist, who I haven't really seen in other things, and then Zendaya as a professional tennis and love triangle. So initially I was thinking casting Zendaya would be distracting in this film, but actually here she plays a tennis superstar um, with such a level of fame in the movie that her, outside fame doesn't actually conflict with her playing this role. I thought it actually maybe helped her, um, you know, pass as this particular character. Um, and she has caught the interest of both Patrick and Art, who have been friends playing tennis forever, at least since high school, but you get a sense that they've known each other for forever. And the film is essentially told in alternating scenes from a present day game where both Art and Patrick are trying to essentially make a comeback, and then the past where they were young tennis players trying to make it, on the scene, and then coming into contact with Zendaya's character Tashi, who is sort of an up and comer. And there, of course, is a love triangle. They both find themselves attracted to Tashi, and Tashi, I think, plays with that a little bit until finally she ends up with the Josh O'Connor character. And then over time, different things happen. And, in present day, Tashi's married to Art. Tashi's been injured. Patrick's sort of nobody on the scene anymore. And so they're in this game, so we're going back and forth with this game. I think all three actors gave or give solid performances, and I especially liked the performance by the Mike Feist actor who plays Art.
Mhm.
Um, he's sort of a second fiddle on the tennis and in the love, but he's doing something much more interesting in some ways, I think, as an actor and his character in this film than maybe the um, other two performances. Although I think they're all kind of great in their particular roles. And I would say, without giving anything away, I really kind of loved the ending because it felt to me the relationship I cared the most
Mhm.
about the most was the one that won, so to speak. And then I don't even know if it's a criticism, but the only thing that really kind of took me out of it a little bit was the music, because
Yeah.
it's got a very
The Trent
intense,
Reznor score. Yeah.
yeah, a very tense and kind of pulsating music score. And most of the time I felt it sort of added to what we were seeing on screen, but then every once in a while I felt like it stepped over the dialogue. And it was hard to understand sort of what was going. And I thought, well, why would you step on your story? Until I saw that it was Trent Reznor. And I thought, well, I guess if you pay him to do your score, you gotta make good use of his music. And hilariously, last night I happened to catch a few minutes of Saturday Night Live, and they were already doing a skit parodying both the music and this competition idea. So it's
Oh,
already
okay.
made it
Interesting.
it's already made it into pop culture in other references. So
Yeah.
this will be the film that we'll see references to probably in other places going forward. So what do you
Yeah,
think?
I think you maybe liked it more than I did. I had high hopes for it because I do look like Luca Guadagnino's films, or however you say his name, with the exception of Suspiria, which I thought was pointless because the original's a perfect film. So why I don't like it when people remake great films. But I've
Yeah.
liked almost all of his films, including Bones and All, which wasn't my favorite of his films. But Call Me by Your Name, I Am Love, A Bigger Splash is a good
Hmm.
film. So he's made a lot of really good films. My
Mhm.
issue with this film is Zendaya. So, who is a huge superstar, and she is very convincing in the tennis scenes as a competitor,
Mm.
with the ferociousness of which she attacks her tennis, and like you said, as the celebrity. The issue is for me is I thought the two guys have the most chemistry together,
Totally,
but the
totally,
that the
totally.
focus of the movie, by and large, is on the sexually, especially, is with their relationships with her. And I didn't buy it. I thought that she seems like she is play acting at someone who's being sexy. I didn't feel the heat like in the scenes where she's making out with Josh O'Connor. It was like left me cold. It was just very cold feeling, especially on her part. She looks like someone, she's wearing her sexy little underwear or whatever. She looks like someone who's pretending to be into having sex, but not really. I didn't buy it at all.
Well, there
And
is a
maybe that's
coolness
part of the
to her for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't
Hmm.
buy her chemistry with either of the guys. So I didn't feel invested in her ending up with either of them, which maybe is part of the point, but it takes you, the film's too long. That's also
Yeah.
part of the issue. I felt like they could easily shave 20 minutes off of a lot of tennis competition scenes.
Yeah.
Some of them are ridiculous, like the fact they're dripping wet in that last scene. I was like, and everyone in the stands is totally cool and dry. So I'm like, it's either only hot on the court. I mean, I get athletes perspire,
They're
but they are like
exerting. That's right.
dripping. I mean, there's water. It looks like it's pouring off of them. And there's the
Yeah,
same thing
yeah.
with the scene where she meets up with Josh and that, and there's the trash flying everywhere. I'm like, is this like the dirtiest city known to man? Because trash is just flying through the air. And I think he's doing that all for effect. But like you said with the Trent Reznor score, some of it gets distracting.
Right.
It is beautiful looking in quite a few shots. He knows how to shoot a movie.
Mhm.
But some of it, particularly like the CGI with the tennis shots, is just a little distracting. So I can't really recommend it. It's like a 2.5 star movie for me. I thought the guys had great chemistry,
Yeah, they're
but I didn't
very
think they had
hot,
great,
those two. Yeah.
yeah, together, especially. And Mike
Hmm.
Feist is a really good actor. He was in West Side Story and was one of the big breakouts from that movie and was great in that movie. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was a
I thought he
very
was in that, but I
interesting.
haven't seen that one yet. So I thought, well, I can't really comment on his role there, but he was great
Yeah,
in
he
that.
was really great. And we're running out of time, which is
Okay,
okay because we're
go.
not going to talk a lot about the next movie.
That's
How many
right.
stars are you giving
I
if you
think
gave
it's
stars?
still a 3. I think it's solid for me. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like 2.5 for me. It just barely missed the mark. I could watch it. But I kept thinking, too long, Luca. Someone needs to tell me he could have easily shaved 20 minutes off that movie. So it didn't have enough plot to sustain that. Okay, we'll move on to our last film. Make this one quick. It's Civil War by Alex Garland, another filmmaker who's he's actually more half and half for me than Luca. I liked half of his films, didn't like half of his other films. This one is about Civil War in America, where the Western states, which in this case is Texas and California, not very likely, or have tried to succeed. And there's a civil war with them and the rest of the US, which is led by a fascist dictator like president who seems kind of clueless. Pretty obvious play there, played by Nick Offerman. Kirsten Dunst is a photojournalist who's on the road, and they're trying to get what they keep calling the money shot. We've only got 2 minutes, so I'm going to sum it up. This isn't a great movie. It's not even a very good movie. Alex Garland knows how to shoot action, and the action scenes are well done, I think. The problem that he has as a filmmaker, which has been a problem in all of his films, is character development. I felt the same way in Ex Machina and Annihilation. It's like you don't care about these people. And when you're in the middle of a civil war where lives are at stake, what you need is character development. You need to care about the people on the screen. And you don't
Mhm.
hear, despite very good performances. I like Kirsten Dunst a lot as an actress. I like the man who plays. I have to look up his name really fast.
Steven Henderson,
Wagner.
probably. Oh, no.
Wagner. Oh yeah, him too. But
Yeah.
Wagner Mora, who plays the main lead, Kayleen Spaney as the tiny little girl. She was fine. There's nothing wrong with the actors here. It's just they're not given anything to work with. So, what's your
I thought,
review?
yeah, I agree. I was underwhelmed by it. I thought I was going to be deeply affected by it. I didn't feel really affected by it at all, except for that one scene where Jesse Plemons plays that kind of creepy guy, and then Stephen Henderson gets his kind of hero moment. That
Yeah,
little section of the film I found very compelling. The film overall, super underwhelming. So
yeah.
yeah, I
Jesse
felt like
Plemons
it.
and for the win. He's the best thing in the movie, and he's only in it
Yeah,
five,
he
ten
and
minutes. So
he and Stephen Henderson together in that little segment are probably the best
yeah,
thing
and
in the
Stephen
film.
Henderson is also great, and not enough of him in the film. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of disappointing. And like you said, considering how amped up you expected to make you feel, it kind of left me cold. So,
Yeah, exactly.
okay, so the winners here are the first three films. I think, particularly our first two films. I think, Luck. Oh gosh, I still can't say it even when I
Chimera
need. Yes,
and
Chimera and
Housekeeping for Beginners.
Housekeeping for Beginners are the recommendations for this week. Thank you for joining, Chris. Really
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you.
it. As always, you can check out our website, realfilmsnobs.com. We're on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And thank you to our sponsors and our fabulous crew, mainly Brad Wortman. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and great movies.